Hello, people. Andrew here, talking about comics from a reader, collector, speculator, investor point of view, in that order of importance to myself. Since we're so close to Halloween, I thought I would do another horror book. And this time I'm going to be looking at 1969's Tower of Shadows from Marvel Comics. So let's go for a little bit of background here. So in 1968, Marvel renegotiated their distribution rights and the way they would distribute their comic books, and were given permission to expand their line of books. And this is why in 68 you see a lot of number ones from some big books. And it's like Tales of Suspense, for example, used to cover a Captain America story and an Iron Man story. So in 1968 they were allowed to split the book, and Tales of Suspense became, as of issue number 100, became Captain America. And Iron Man, after a brief one-shot with Submariner, got his own title as well, Iron Man number 1. This was in 68. This happened for a number of titles, Tales to Astonish and Strange Tales. So they expanded their line of books. Some critics at the time, people who liked reading Marvel Comics, thought that perhaps they expanded too quickly and they expanded too much, because they didn't have the talent necessary to maintain the quality of books up to that point in time. Jack Kirby was illustrating Fantastic Four and Thor and doing 10 pages for Captain America. Well, now his workload increased by at least another 10 pages for a full Captain America story, so now he's doing 60 pages a month. Gene Colan would be another one who was doing Daredevil, now he's doing Doctor Strange, and he's up to 40 plus pages a month. And the same thing with some of the other artists. So there was a consensus among some fans that they overextended and the quality had deteriorated. Martin Goodman didn't care about that. He's the publisher of Marvel at this time, and what he's looking to do is to sell the business. So what he wants is to have a greater market share. The more books out there on the market, the better chances that he can increase his profits and make the business look a little bit more attractive. In the 60s, in the later half of the 60s, from the mid to late 60s, DC dominated the sales charts. Often they would have 7 or 8 titles in the top 10. Marvel didn't get its first top 10 book until 1969, and it was just once with an Amazing Spider-Man. Most of it was, as I say, from the mid 60s to the late 60s, was DC. And their big seller was Superman and super related things: Superboy, Action Comics, Lois Lane, World's Finest. The other one that took a lot of top spots was Archie. Archie and Betty and Veronica, often in the top 10 sales of a given year, so, or in a given month as well. So Marvel was looking, they haven't become the powerhouse that they will become, so they're looking to get more and more of their market share. So this is in 68. So in 69, I mean, as much as Martin Goodman's trying to, increase the product and sell it, Stan Lee's also, he works for him and says, and he's kind of a competitive guy. He's looking for new titles to put out onto the market. And he's often looks to what's happening over at DC. And he sees that, DC has started to challenge the Comics Code Authority. They've rejigged House of Mystery and reissued House of Secrets and turned them into horror anthologies. Horror was off the table for a number of years, thanks to the big scare back in the early 50s. So DC thought, you know what, let's test the waters with some light horror. And they there weren't the teeth. There wasn't a lot of teeth on the Comics Code Authority, and I'm not even sure how they figured out what is horror and what isn't. A lot of it had to do with words. DC did get a slap on the wrist, but they had to, like, what are you talking about? Because they featured in one of their stories a term about a rascally wolfman who's lurking through these pages or some such thing. And they were referring to the writer, Marv Wolfman, who wrote the piece. And, the Comics Code Authority says, you can't use the word Wolfman. You're not allowed to have Wolfman in a comic book. It's like, are you even reading this thing, or are you just doing like a spell check for words? So they weren't effective, and very soon, even even the '70s were the boom of horror books. Uh, Again, it's because the Comics Code Authority meant pretty much nothing at this stage in time. So they were having some success over there with their horror anthologies, particularly House of Mystery is doing well. And Stanley looks over there and says, "Hey, you know what? Let's do a horror anthology of our own." So in 1969, he releases two books, Tower of Shadows and Chamber of Darkness, and they are horror anthology books. Are they? Are they? What are they about? Well, obviously horror anthology, and is it worth the read? Well, it depends on who you are as far as what you like as well. Like if you're into a horror anthology series at all, then yes, because I always believe that you'll find a story somewhere in here that you're going to like and maybe remember or whatever. But you're going to appreciate that short horror story, and that's no different for myself. In fact, the one story that I like the best out of the Tower of Shadows is actually featured in this first issue. It's The Stroke of Midnight. So that's who would read this particular book. I think where it really shines beyond that, because I like reading this, is in the collectors. What Because of all of the talent involved in these 9 issues. There's only 9 issues of Tower of Shadows in one annual because it didn't sell that well. It did change title from Tower of Shadows, and in issue number 10 it became Creatures on the Loose. But Creatures on the Loose is significantly different in tone and what they present. Not so much initially, but after our first few issues, it does become somewhat of a different book. So I'm going to look at that one at another time. But for now, I'm just looking at the 9 issues of Tower of Shadows. And when I say it's collectible, it's because of the talent that was involved in it. This one, for example, you've got a cover by John Romita Sr. I love this cover. You know, the painting with the hand coming up. But a lot of the stories have that kind of Twilight Zone more so than horror. You know, somebody, usually it's a ne'er-do-well, somebody who gets his comeuppance, but there's like a twist ending for these stories. Not truly horrific, but more of a Twilight Zone type of thing. They do some adaptations of H.P. Lovecraft material, or it's inspired by H.P. Lovecraft material. In fact, in the issue number 9, there's one that actually says this is based on an H.P. Lovecraft story called Pickman's Model. So there's that kind of horror, and then there's a weird blend. Well, I'll get to the weird blend as well. So there's a lot of different stories here, and they're not particularly what I would consider horrific, but into that kind of genre. But as I say, collectible reasons, you've got John Romita Sr. doing the cover on this one, and that story, At the Stroke of Midnight, is written and illustrated by Jim Steranko. I think it's the best story in the bunch. Included in this issue as well is you've got written and drawn by Johnny Cragg, and you've got a story written by Stan Lee and illustrated by John Romita Sr. So a lot of talent, a lot of original material. And this is what sort of drew me to Tower of Shadows as opposed to some of the other books out there like Uncanny Tales or Vault of Evil or Crypt of Shadows or whatever it was, is because a lot of those books were just nothing more than reprints of stuff from the late 50s, from their Tales to Astonish and Suspense before the superhero genre took over. So a lot of reprinted this, but this is original material for the most part. So this one is all original material, and as I say, with the Jim Steranko stuff in here, it's a very good story. Issue number 2, another John Romita Sr. cover. I love the cover here. I think this is great. And inside, you get a story that's written and drawn by Neal Adams. Again, another prominent artist and creator. So, you know, the talent is there. Okay, I gotta talk a little bit about this one here. This is this is issue number 3, and it's Marie Severin cover here, and there's a story in here that's sort of inspired and based on an H.P. Lovecraft story, and it's illustrated by Barry Windsor-Smith. So down at the bottom here, you can see there's a signature. Oh. Okay, So that's Barry Windsor-Smith's signature from the year 2000. That's some of his artwork there. The year 2000, I'm down at the what is it? The Comic Book Expo in Toronto, held in late August in the year 2000 at the Metro Convention Center. And I've gone down there specifically because I want to check out some of the dealers and see if I can buy some books that I can't find regularly in the city from the current dealers, and shop around for some better stuff. This is where I believe I got my copy of Avengers 57, Giant Size Creatures #1, and a couple of issues of Tower of Shadows #1, and this one here #3. It's a noisy place down at that Metro Convention Center, and every, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes there's somebody that's coming over the PA system, and it sounds like you're like on a subway platform. It's like, and it's like, I have no idea what you're saying, and it's echoing, and it's just noise. And when they're not talking, there's some music going on here and some music going on there. It's just very, very noisy. So you sort of zone out and just look for your comic books. This is what I did. There's other things going on at the show, but I was there particularly for the comic books. And it just so happens, after I buy these things, that Barry Windsor-Smith is one of the guests at the convention. And I look over there, and there he is. He's sitting there. There's just one person in front of him. And I'm thinking, I don't usually get these things signed. I'm not that interested. But here I am. I just happened to buy this particular book that has Barry Windsor-Smith's artwork in it. Why not get it signed? And there's no lineup here. Nobody charges anything for a signature. Of course, nowadays, you got to have somebody witness that, that's an official signature. Otherwise, it's not an official signature. Well, you know what? You can forge the little card that says, I witnessed that this was a signature. So anyway, so I wait there, and I'm standing there waiting. And, Barry Windsor-Smith, he's got this sort of like irritated look on his face and in his mannerisms while he's sitting there. And every once in a while, when the PA system would go on and start echoing through, and he was just like grimace and whatever. The guy leaves, and I come up to Barry Windsor-Smith, and he looks at me and he says, "So what do you want?" And it's like, okay, could you sign this book? And I give him the book, and he's like, I suppose he's been seeing so much Conan and stuff and probably hasn't seen a copy of Tower of Shadows 3 come by his way too often today. So he starts to, looks at it and starts to look at his work. And I think, well, I've got him here. Let's ask him a question. But I'm prepared. I don't know what I should ask him. Should I talk about his work from Conan, his, what was he used for models and stuff? And the only thing that came to my head was, what medium do you like to work in? Because I know that Barry Windsor-Smith enjoys a number of different mediums. His watercolor stuff is really good, but he does pen and ink. And I said, what's your favorite medium of the bunch? And he looks at me and says, that's a stupid question. And I thought, okay, I suppose it is. He says, whatever medium I'm working in is the medium that I like best. And he signs my book, and the PA system goes off, and he goes, and he's just like looking around at the phantom fairies of noise that are floating around. He is having a miserable time in this echo chamber up on the second floor at the Metro Convention Center. And you know what? I thank him for signing the book, and I move on. And unfortunately, there was no great discussion with Barry Windsor-Smith about anything, and that was my first and only encounter with Barry Windsor-Smith. But he had a disgruntled day. I ended up with a copy of Tower of Shadows signed by Barry Windsor-Smith. So issue number 4, you've got Marv Wolfman and Gene Colan doing a story. You got Denny O'Neil and Tom Sutton providing the artwork from it. This is again a great Marie Severin cover. This is a really beat up copy that at some point in time I'll want to get a better copy of, but I'll talk about buying this series in a minute. So this one, Barry Windsor-Smith does a story, but it's also the first Wally Wood story that's in here, and Wally Wood does a few stories for Tower of Shadows. And I like Wally Wood too, but they're weird in some respects because I don't know that they actually fit in with a horror anthology. They're more sword and sorcery. All three of his stories that he does for Tower of Shadows, I think it's just three, they're all sword and sorcery based, and I would not call them horror. The third one is perhaps the most horrific of the bunch, but really they're just short little fantasy adventures. And here again, we got Wally Wood doing some stuff. We've got Tom Sutton doing artwork, and Stan Lee and Steve Ditko do a story in here. Again, another Marie Severin cover. All names and things that are highly collectible. But as I say, the sales of the book were not. I love this cover. This is a Kirby and Marie Severin cover with Titano. Titano, as I said, they weren't selling as well as they had wanted, so they stopped putting as much effort into it. This only contains, I think, it's just a single. No, it's got two original stories, and the third is a reprint story. Titano is the reprint. But it does include a Barry Windsor-Smith story in here, and I like that one as well. But again, another Wally Wood sort of sword and sorcery fantasy, but it's a great cover and a good book. And you talk about cover artists and whatever. This is a Berni Wrightson cover. Again, see, it's got sort of that sword and sorcery. This is again, Wally Wood provides a story in here, but this is a Berni Wrightson cover. And this is issue number 8. And then you get your final one, issue number 9, which again is another Berni Wrightson cover. And there's an adaptation of an H.P. Lovecraft story. And it's, written by, who is it? Marv Wolfman, I think? I'm not sure who wrote it. Anyways, most of this book, other than the Pickman's model, is reprints. So they've gotten into reprints by this point in time because they just didn't put that much money into it. The sales just weren't there. And after 9 issues, it comes to a close. After it was finished off, they did release an annual. This was afterwards. And basically, it has a number of stories reprinted from issues 1 and 2. I believe that's the cover to issue number 2 right there. So, as I say, for a collector, it's a great collector. If as long as people are collecting comics, there will be a need for, a desire for Bronze Age horror, and this is definitely goes into that because it also has so much talent of the time involved in this. Neal Adams, Jim Steranko, Berni Wrightson, Barry Windsor-Smith, Wally Wood, some of these great Bronze Age covers. So it's a highly collectible series. As far as spec or investment, I wouldn't encase any of this stuff in plastic, but then I don't do that anyway. So, having a 9/8 Tower of Shadows #1, that's probably your big key. But you will get collectors of the Bronze Age horror that will buy lesser copies. As I said, with that issue number 5, that's all beat up and whatever. Maybe I found that one in a dollar bin. I'm not sure that you would find one in that condition in a dollar bin anymore. It might be in a $5 bin, but the prices on these things will vary widely. I mean, $20 to $50 to $5 over here, $10. It's all going to depend on the condition. One of the nice things about these Bronze Age horror books, especially something like Tower of Shadows that has all this talent, is that provided people are still interested in buying comic books, there will always be a market for it. Because, Bronze Age horror is not even a cult. It just, a lot of people like to buy Bronze Age horror books. So if you can find some of these at a lower price, and the better the condition, it's the better for you, then you could see a return on that speculation or that investment, but I wouldn't guarantee it. I mean, even a 9/8 in this is probably going to be a fair chunk of change, but even a 9/0 is only $50 to $70 for an issue 1, maybe more, but it's not like the high 500, 1,000. It's not climbing like that. It's just a quality Bronze Age horror book. that if you can find it inexpensively, if your intention is just to turn around and try and sell it, wait a few years or whatever, but there'll be a market for it at some point in time, provided we still buy comic books. So I do like it. I do recommend it for those that like the horror genre. I've done a couple of other videos on horror anthology. I did one on Twisted Tales, and I did one on a DC Vertigo series called Flinch. Now, out of the three of them so far, I think Flinch is my favorite. This one has some stories. I liked, as I said, the Jim Steranko stuff was good. I liked Barry Windsor-Smith stuff. He tended to move more towards the Lovecraft material, and he was a good illustrator for that material. So I did like some of that stuff, and some of the stuff. The Wally Wood stuff was, really sword and sorcery type of thing. But overall, I enjoyed the series. I enjoyed horror anthology, so I enjoyed the series. And as I said, a great collectible series. It's only 9 issues plus 1 annual long. Spec and investment. You're sort of on your own on that one, but with 9 issues, say $100, maybe less to buy the whole thing, depending on condition. But $100 that might be a little lower if you wanted a decent condition, like a 6 or 7 for some of the books. I would imagine that 6 or 7 of issue number 1 or 2 or 3 or any of those sort of things is going to be at least $20 to $30. So, maybe $200 to $300 to buy a nice set for Tower of Shadows. Anyways, that's it. That's my take on Tower of Shadows. Happy Halloween to y'all. And that's all I got to say. Be good to yourself. Don't hand out any bad candies. Just hand out good candies. I liked it when they handed out the chocolate bars and things. Anyways, so be good to yourself. Be good to others. And we'll talk again soon.